You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Sara. Now, Lopedito?
Nailed it.
I nailed it. Oh, don't even ask me to do that one again. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what do you do professionally?
Okay, so I am 31. I'll be 32 in January. I am a welder fabricator. I work at a factory that makes industrial laundry equipment. More specifically, I work in the dryer department. So I work on industrial dryers. It's stuff for like cruise
Hotels.
ships, prisons, hotels. Yep.
Yeah, I work at a hotel during the day, so we actually have a dryer and it sucks. It breaks down a lot and we have to have people come by and weld certain pieces to it and everything. It's insane. How did you get into welding?
That is an interesting story. Well, first off, my older brother, younger brother, and my stepdad, they all work in the plumbers and pipe fitters union. So they are welders. And I used to be a drug addict and I was sentenced to 4 years in prison. This was 9 years ago. I have 9 years clean and sober now. But when I went to prison, you have to have a job. And one of the jobs there was welding. And I thought, why not do welding? My brothers do it. My stepdad does it. It's a good career. It's something cool that I could learn. So that was my job while I was in prison. And the women's prison here in New York State, they weld and fabricate all the trash cans and grills that you would see in any state-owned property or parks or like in New York City. So I did that for a year while I was in prison. And then when I got home, I went to trade school for it just to learn a little bit more. And the last month of trade school is an internship. And I interned where I work now. And they liked me enough that they hired me. So
So it was more like
I kind of like to say that
it was like a forced on kind of hobby or forced on kind of job. Like you had to do it because you needed one, and then you found that you were really
right.
interested into it.
Yes, I would have never probably went into that field if it wasn't for prison. But I mean, it turns out that I love it. I absolutely love my job, and I like to say that it almost like saved my life in a way because I don't know, it just gave me something to do and to look forward to when I got home, and it's kept me doing well because I'm very busy with work with a lot of overtime.
Did you ever think you were going to go this route?
No, not at all. Honestly, before prison, I worked a ton of like odd jobs and none of them lasted that long. And I was always mostly working retail. And if I'm being dead honest, I hate dealing with customers and I hate dealing with people. So
I mean, that's one of the hardest jobs to do is actually work with the public, only because you don't never know when you're going to catch somebody on a bad day. And then you have to give them like a perfect attitude, even though you might be suffering more than that person is.
Exactly. Yep.
I mean, I worked at a hotel. I can give you a certain instance that happened today. Our housekeeping comes in at 9:00, and so we were getting calls before 9. So this woman asked for toilet paper, and I went up with a roll of toilet paper, gave it to her, and she said, "Can I also get a box of tissues?" And I told her that I don't have access to that until the housekeeping staff comes in. So she'll have to wait just another 20 minutes, and then someone can get her tissues. I went right back downstairs, and immediately she called down again and asked that she wanted tissues and washcloths. I was like, I just told her. And
right.
I give them to her. I had to go and wait 20 minutes and finally give them to her. I was like, here you go. Your housekeeper should be up here soon. And she goes, she just gives me like a dead stare and shuts the door. I'm just like, all right, like, if you can't be patient, I don't know how to help you.
Yeah, I hate people. Like, obviously not all people, but I totally feel you because retail is not for me.
So if you don't mind me asking, what happened with the whole drug thing? Because I went to school for chemical dependency because a lot of people, like in my area in Ocean City, were suffering from, like, we're seeing kids be trying drugs earlier and earlier now.
It's an epidemic right now. So let's see. I feel like alcoholism and drug addiction, I would say, definitely runs on both sides of my family. And in high school, I would say that I drank a lot and partied a lot and smoked a lot of weed and dabbled in a few other things. And then after high school, I met a boyfriend, and he had done heroin before. And eventually I tried it and I loved it. And I feel like that turned into a full-blown addiction. And there was periods of time where like I'd try to get clean and it just never worked out. So then I feel like I was sick and needed drugs, and I don't know what possessed me, but I burglarized a bunch of people's houses for money. And I was caught, obviously, and that's when I was sentenced to prison for 5 years with my good time. And because I went to college the whole time, I got more good time. I wound up coming home after 4 years. But I truly feel if it wasn't for me being sentenced to prison, that I never would have got clean. Like, it was almost a blessing in disguise, so to speak.
Yeah, sometimes people who experience like a drug, like for alcohol addiction, is on my side of the family too. It's on my father's side. So I steered away from it. Like, I'm 21 years old and haven't bought a legal drink of alcohol because I had a few kind of bad incidences with it myself. And then I saw like one of my friends that I went to school with actually got in a severe car accident and killed his passenger from drinking and driving. And I had him on the podcast to talk about it, but he talks about, like, now he goes to schools and motivationally speak and warns them about drinking and driving.
Yes,
See
yes.
the full turnaround. But like, where addiction and things start to lie, I mean, I appreciate you being open and sharing that.
Yeah,
But like, where addiction lies is the factor that life is very, very draining. I don't think a lot of people truly
yes,
see that. Um,
yeah,
I started realizing, like, being 21 years old and not drinking, you get depressed a little bit. You're like,
yeah,
you're just working, you're doing whatever you're doing. And it's like, it feels like you're never really getting anywhere, especially for
yeah,
me around this time. And
yeah.
I started wondering, like, why are all my friends out at the bar and putting up pictures of them partying? And I started realizing, oh, since I don't drink, I'm starting to actually realize what's going on around me when they're just basically drinking through their depression.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I feel like it's hard, and I think that sometimes, like, why can't I just be normal, and just go out and have a drink or two or whatever. But I think it's awesome that you don't drink and that you're not interested in it, because I feel like people who come from families of addiction, it either goes one of two ways. Like, you become addicted, or you see it firsthand, so you decide to, like, never try it. You know what I mean?
It's not, I wouldn't say that it's that your head's messed up or anything like you just said. I wouldn't say any of that is on you. I think the problem is, like, even with me, like, I have an addiction. My addiction is I go to the gym every single day and I've never taken a day off. I've done it for 7 years and I have never stopped.
Yeah.
I wake up, like, just today, like, I was doing deadlifts, which I never do, at freaking 2 o'clock in the morning, got home at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then went to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. I don't ever sleep, so my brain's constantly running. But like,
Oh my God.
there are some days I pop out of my bed or something, and I sound like with the Pillsbury Doughboy when you open up the freaking things to pop the cookies, that pop noise. That's my
Yeah.
bones getting out of bed.
Oh
Like,
my God.
yeah, like, it's not, my body's like, it's hard for my body to recover when I'm working out 24/7. Like, as soon as I get stressed, it immediately goes to, let's go work out. So I mean,
Yeah.
I understand what that is. I mean, in a different way, but I think we all have something we can get addicted to. Like, for me, I realized that, like, I had really bad experiences with alcohol, so I kind of steered away from it. I had my days of smoking pot, steered away from it. I'm trying to find, I think we're all trying to find a place in this world. There's something that can get our time going by. And I think that's what can kind of relate with you when it comes to welding. Like, you found something, but you had to experience something to get there.
absolutely. I would agree with that for sure.
Now, what did you find to be the most interesting about welding? I mean, I took an HVAC class in school, and I mean, there's a bunch of 15, 16-year-old kids around butane torches and all this stuff, which is
Oh
never a
God.
good idea. Like,
Right.
I mean, when someone asks for a hammer, like you basically chuck a hammer across the classroom, and someone's like, "What the hell?" You're like, "You asked for it." Like,
Right. I would say, I mean, I really like that I just get to go to work and like I'm working by myself on something. So like it's like the total opposite of retail. Like I'm just focused on something, like no one's really bothering me, whatever. But I also find it just so cool that like I have all these pieces of metal, and I put them together to build like this gigantic washer. And it's just like so cool, like I built that, like for me to stand next to it, it's massive. And just to know that like I took all these little pieces and followed a blueprint and welded it and I made that. It gives me pride.
yeah, it's like for I've it's like when you build something or you create something like music or something, and then it finally gets published or something. There's a sense of pride to it. You put in a shit ton of work. You put in literally like tears, sometimes even blood, to try and create this device that they're going to use for some type of commercial reasoning or something, and you get to see it pay off. It's
Oh
kind of
yeah,
there's a sense of pride you carry with it.
for sure.
What was the hardest, like one of the hardest things you've ever done welding?
The hardest thing I've ever done welding. Um,
Like, is it maybe the process of learning it, or is it just maybe trying to get this one project done and you felt like you couldn't figure it out or you couldn't nail it right? 'Cause I feel like with welding, it's very, very complicated, making sure that you can get certain things and pieces warmed up to a certain degree where you can either solder or do whatever you have to do to make sure all the pieces fit together.
yeah, I'm gonna say that it was definitely the process. Like I was so nervous to go to school and like what would people think, and like at first I feel like I got a few side eyes from the guys there, and I
That's
noticed like
that's literally what, when I reached out to you, I was like,
yeah
holy shit, she's a female welder.
yeah
I was like,
yeah
that's so fucking
yeah
interesting. And I realized there's not a lot of female welders out there.
there is not. I think in my whole building there's three of us, and I don't know how to say this without being like not politically correct, but out of all the female welders, I'm the only one who's like a girly girl. You know what I mean? Who outside of work, I am into shoes and makeup and bags and all this and that. So I feel like,
Starbucks, Uggs, yeah, all that.
yeah. So people to see me outside of work, and if I introduce them, like they are shocked when I tell them what my job is, and I feel like that's been a challenge in itself, just because I feel like I've earned my respect at work now. But when I first started working there, I feel like people like quality and people who would see my work after and would work on it, I feel like they would literally they'd examine my work like extra hard, and they would just look for anything to say negative about it. You know what I mean? And some old timers are very old school and think that like this is a man's job. So I feel like that was a difficult process, just being accepted and respected by everybody at work.
So not even the process of trying to actually learn the equipment, but more of the process of trying to break down the barrier of this male female type job description.
Yeah, and fitting in for sure.
Now, what would you say has been one of the most like inspiring things, or more, I guess, creative things that you've learned with welding?
Huh. Let's see. That's a good question. I just feel like
Oh, I appreciate it. I'm pretty good, I think, at asking some questions. I was kidding.
yeah. I just think like the possibilities are endless. Like I just went in there like learning how to make laundry equipment, but I realized that like you can really do anything you want with metal.
You can
And
take
then
that into
recently, like,
automotive. You can make your own like bike,
yeah,
you can make your own cars. I mean, for me,
oh yeah, Yep.
When I learned welding, we were soldering stuff together. And I remember I made my grandma, because she used to live in Florida. So she loves Florida, loves palm trees, all these types of things.
Yeah.
And it was like a Christmas thing. We were making Christmas gifts for our family, so we get to use a bunch of copper tubing and try and create something. The one kid that I was talking about that got into the car accident, he was making a bong out of copper piping, and
Oh my God, that's so funny.
I decided to make a palm tree, and I made a palm tree, and it was okay. It was, I tried to the best of my ability, and I gave it to her, and I still see it when I walk over to her house. She still has it on top of her microwave.
Oh, I bet she loved it.
I mean, I hope she loved it, because it did not really look like a palm tree at the beginning. I was like, oh, I don't know what this is going to be.
Oh, that's cute. Yeah. So more recently, over the summer, I just bought a personal welder for myself for the garage. And we just moved. Like I said, we didn't have a garage at our last house, but we're new homeowners, and our new house came with the garage. So I'm excited to get that all set up. And I want to start making like little artsy stuff, like garden ornaments, and maybe like little cool shelves for the house, and maybe see if I can turn that into a side job. And at the very least, it'll be a cool hobby.
Now, you're not afraid of like the tank exploding or anything? I feel like that pops into a lot of people's heads.
Um, I've never been nervous about the tank exploding per se. Like, I'm not even sure how that would happen, like, unless you knocked it over. I feel like I get more nervous about like cutting wheels exploding, or even like when we're working like with the oxyacetylene tank, the torch. And maybe not so much when I'm doing it, because I try to be extra careful, but like even just being next to someone who's using it, like I just hope that, they know what they're doing, so there's not a big accident. I get nervous about stuff like that more so.
I'll never forget, there was this kid in my class, and he grabbed we had acetylene torches in class, and he grabbed one of them, and he didn't realize how long the cord was.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts walking away with the torch to go look at what the teacher was doing, and he rips the thing out of like the pulls the hose out of the like tank a little bit, and this
Idiot.
whole tank falls, and I mean hits hard as shit on the
Oh my God.
on like the marble floor.
Yeah.
And my teacher turned around and started like screaming, like, oh, like, because we thought it was going to explode. And like after that, he reset everything, had everybody come back from the shop inside the class. We're all sitting there like, what just happened? He like, you just realized you guys almost all just died.
Oh my God. So it didn't explode, I'm guessing?
No, it didn't. But we all looked at him. We were like, you jackass. Like, you almost killed all of us and we didn't even know. But I remember the next couple of days in class, like he wasn't allowed to use the torch, and everybody was like kind of freaky about using it, because like you have to make sure you turn the knobs in the correct way to get the right amount of pressure. And I was always afraid that I was going to forget something, and next thing I knew, it would explode. So one of my first episodes is my buddy Skylar. He was in the same class as me. So what I would do is I would get him to start up my torch for me, or I would see him start up his torch, and I'd be like, hey, can you help me start up mine real quick? And he'd give me the hose to hold while he starts up my torch. And I would just use his horse. I was like, oh, well, you got that one started. I'm going to use this one. And he's like, you son of a bitch.
Wow.
I do have to ask, though, like, what types of things have you thought about creating with your welding skills?
Like I said, I want to do definitely like little ornaments for the garden. And then I want to make like shelves for the house, and maybe, I don't know, I see it's so hard because I follow so many cool welding people on Instagram, and they make so much stuff that like I don't want to steal their ideas per se, but I see that they even take like little forks and spoons and like make little animals or little trucks. So I want to try to build cutesy stuff like that.
I remember my one buddy built wind chimes for his garden.
Yeah, see, that'd be cool.
I think there's a lot of capabilities when it comes to welding too. Like, it's pretty cool to, especially if you're trying to get into art, if you have a creative side to you.
Yes.
Now you said with welding, now what's the difference between welding and fabricating?
That is a great question. And honestly, I don't really know. I think welding is like the actual act of welding, where I would say fabricating is like more intricate. It's like using your square to make sure stuff is square, and reading your blueprint to make sure that things are where they're supposed to go, and also like drilling and tapping holes and locating where things are supposed to go. That would be my answer, but honestly, that's a great question. I've never like Googled like what they are each.
Now, when it comes to welding, now, did you have to get different certifications? Like, I know there's like certain things you have to go to a class for to be able to weld a certain specific type of metal.
What was the question again?
Like, so when you're welding, you have to, there's different types of metals that you are capable of welding with. So did you have to get any classifications or take any extra classes to get your licenses and using different metals?
Yeah. So my job where I work, they do not require any certificates or certifications or anything like that. You do have to pass their weld tests, which is just stuff they throw together. They want to see your welds. But when I went to school, I did get my certification for D1.1, which is stick welding, and it's structural steel. And I never wound up needing it, but certain jobs will require you to have certain certifications. I don't know if any certifications differ for different types of metal, but I know that they have different qualifications for the different processes. Like I know that there's certifications for MIG welding, which are different from the certifications for stick welding. And it's funny because my only certification is for stick welding, and I haven't stick welded since school because I mostly MIG and TIG at my job.
What is MIG and TIG?
So MIG is with a gun. That's what they call it. And like you push the button and that's MIG. And then TIG welding is when you have a torch and you have a foot pedal, and then you're also using your other hand at the same time to feed the filler rod, and you melt the filler rod with the torch, whereas MIG, the metal comes right out of the gun.
Oh, so I did TIG welding when I was in school. You had a foot pedal and everything. Which one do you find to be the most appealing or the most that you like?
I like MIG welding the easiest because in my opinion, it is the easiest. So I don't want to say just anybody could do it, but I'm very confident in my abilities. Like my MIG welds are just beautiful. Like it's not much for me to lay some really good looking MIG welds, where TIG is a little more difficult just because you're using both hands and a foot pedal, and it's more difficult to get a bead that is appealing to the eye. So I think MIG is definitely my favorite for sure.
Now, when it comes to turning on the torch and kind of setting up in a way, I want to ask though, like, do you have to wait? Like the prime kind of spot for the torch, is it supposed to be like a cherry blue, and then it's supposed to make a whistling sound, right?
Are we talking TIG or MIG?
For TIG welding.
I've never heard that. I'm not sure.
Because I remember when using an acetylene torch in HVAC in my school, we had to make sure that it was making like a nice whistling noise.
Okay, I could see that with the torch, the oxyacetylene torch, but for TIG welding, there's no like whistling sound or anything. But when you're holding the torch to the metal, you want to I can't recall exactly like what color it turns, but you want to see that it's hot enough that the base metal is like melting and that it's pooling a little bit before you want to dab the filler rod into it, just so that way that melts.
Have you ever had any crazy cases on the job?
Crazy cases. We did have a guy who got his arm caught in I don't know what kind of saw it was, but it was a saw. He was in the next area over, the next apartment over, which is a machine shop. And he was cleaning it, and I don't know if he forgot to turn it off or whatnot, but all we heard was him screaming, and everyone ran towards him, and I think I was the only one who ran the opposite way, just because I'm not good with those type of situations, especially if there's blood. So that's probably a crazy story that happened at work. I'm trying to think if there's been.
Holy shit, it's like a horror movie at work. That's the last thing you want to expect when you're just coming in to weld some stuff.
My boss did get fired for sexually harassing me. So
what?
Yeah, yes, that is. He
Hold on a second. You want to talk about people looking at you and judging your work basically because you're a woman and you're doing what they consider a guy's job, which we know is not true, and you get sexually harassed at work?
I was, yes. And so let's see. He's always been kind of a creep, and he had a similar situation with another woman who worked there. She doesn't work there anymore, but he's married and has a kid. And so he had been in trouble for, I don't know if it was specifically called sexually harassing her, but he got in trouble for her because she complained. And so he was always kind of weird, but not like weird enough where I want to ruin the guy's life and get him in trouble. He would just always he'd walk by my area and I'd just be busy welding, and he'd be like, "Shut up, Sarah," like for no reason. And he'd do this in front of people, like thinking he's cool, whatever. He had horrible communication skills. My whole department felt that way, even the men. So a long time ago, a few years when I had first started working there, he had made comments about how everybody cheats and cheating is normal. And he invited me over a few times, but I had always said no. After I had told him, I think cheating's disgusting, I think that's horrible, he never said anything like that to me ever again. Fast forward a few years later, mind you, when he said that originally, he wasn't the boss yet. So fast forward a few years later, he's the boss now. And my current boyfriend, also works in the same shop. And my boss and my boyfriend, they have never really liked each other. That went back a few years. So my boyfriend was scheduled to go out of town for work. And my boss, I forget why I brought it up, but my boss knew. And he was like, "Well, if you want to come over while he's gone and hang out, you can, whatever." And I didn't say anything. I just brushed it off. I figured in my head, oh, he'll never know when he's out of town, so it won't be a big deal. So later that day, he texts me and says something about "Oh, if we hang out, you got to keep it discreet because of all the sexual harassment stuff going on at work." And I just don't say anything, whatever. So a few days later, my boyfriend's out of town, and his boss had to drop him off at the airport. So because his boss was out of the building to drop him off at the airport, he had to send out an email letting him know. And I guess the email went to everybody. So my boss saw this, and now he knows my boyfriend is out of town. So he approaches me and he says, I forget what he says. He invited me over, and then he made comments about how when spouses are out of town, they cheat, and that's just normal. That's just what happens, whatever. So I told my boyfriend, I'm like, "Listen, can you tell your boss next time not to email the whole building? Because I don't want my boss to know when you're out of town, because this makes me uncomfortable." So my boss told his boss that, and then his boss told human resources. I didn't even tell anyone, but when human resources pulled me into the office and asked me if this was true, I told them the truth. And he wound up getting fired, which I was very nervous about at first. I don't want to ruin anyone's life, you know what I mean? But at the same time,
you went a higher road than I did. If I was you, I would have burned his ass. I would have been like, "Look, I've been in prison," and I would have just put out a torch and lit him.
You're so funny. I just feel like the nerve of him. Did you really think I wasn't going to tell my boyfriend, who you and him have a history of not liking each other? I just can't believe he thought that he thought he had a chance with me or something, because I immediately told my boyfriend, you know what I mean? I'm uncomfortable.
Well, he was coming from a sense that he had. he was coming from a sense of that since he was your boss, he had power over you, and that was going to change your whole relationship and everything. I was like, if I was you, I
Right.
mean, you took a higher road on it. Like, I congratulate you for that too. And that kind of fucking
Thank you.
sucks too, because of the whole fact, like, you've already kind of been like, you're trying to find your place, especially like coming out of like a really hard time in your life and then finding welding and then trying
Yeah.
to go through this stuff and not even given the light of
Yeah.
day because other people can't even get past your gender. And then the whole factor of
Right.
some person's going to try and take advantage of you thinking that they can because they're in a better position
Ugh.
of power. It's so fucked up.
It is, and it disgusts me because he has a wife who I've met, and she's a great person, and he has a beautiful daughter. And at first, I was nervous about human resources knowing, just because like that man's going to lose his job, and that's going to affect everything for him. But at the end of the day, I like my job so much better. Like there was a year there where I hated going to work. I dreaded it. Like when my work was done, you're supposed to get your boss to check over your work. And I would always stall. I dreaded having to go get him. I dreaded having conversations with him. Like I couldn't say anything. Like if I needed a day off, he would just like pry into personal business. So I was nervous about it at first, but one of my really, really good friends, he got the lead position, and I like have fallen in love with work all over again. And I love being there and I love going there. So, I mean, that's how it should be anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share something. I was sexually
Okay.
assaulted at work my first year.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so imagine I'm like 19 years old, 18 years
Right.
old, and so I'm a young kid, kind of walking through the hotel, and there's these housekeepers. So there was this small housekeeper. Her name was Juanita. She would take the bus from Salisbury all the way into Ocean City. It's about a 45-minute bus ride or an hour and a half bus ride, and you have to wait for the bus too.
Yeah.
She would get drunk. So
Oh
one
my,
of the main things at a hotel, which is kind of crazy, but I bring home a lot of alcohol. Like I'll bring home probably cases and cases of beer sometimes, but I don't drink. So it just sits in my fridge in my garage, and I just give them to my buddy when he comes down.
yeah.
And so like I'm kind of his fix. No, I'm just kidding. But she would literally like hide tequila bottles in her cart,
Oh my God.
like in her laundry cart. So I'm going to empty out the laundry cart and there'd be a giant bottle of like Svedka in her cart. And I'm like,
Wow.
I don't know what to say. And everyone knew she kind of drank and still worked. But because you would see towards the end of the day, she was hammered. Like she'd be
Right.
spilling stuff everywhere. She could never put her card away. She would always like barely talk to anybody. And I remember
Oh my
one
God.
one day in the morning, she came into work and she was just gone, like trashed already. And this is like at 9 a.m. And I'm sitting there on
Wow.
this dresser, and she comes up to me and she goes, "Hey baby, does my breath smell bad?" And I'm like, "What?" And she goes up to breathe in my face. And I'm like,
Ugh.
I push her away. I'm like, "Oh God, it's terrible." And then she leans in real close and tries to kiss me on the lips. Yeah.
Oh my God. How
So
old is this woman?
this woman's like in her 50s.
Oh
Like,
my God. She
and
could be
it's
your mother.
and not good 50s either,
Oh,
not like cougarmeat.com. We're talking like
oh my God.
she has a good 4 teeth left in her mouth, but like the 4 essential ones, like the one up front, the one at the
Oh my
bottom, and then
God.
the 2 off to the sides. We call those like the 9 and 10 pin.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And I'm looking at her. I'm like, I stick my hand up in front of me to block her, and kind of like, like if you're kind of like keeping your arm out at a distance to make sure they don't get near you.
Right.
And she's like, "Did you just touch my boobs?" I'm like, "What?" And then she starts screaming and starts cussing at me, calling me like a piece of shit and all this stuff. I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, what?" And I was like, I'm technically still a kid. It hit me. I had to get up and walk away. I was so upset. Like I was really freaked out. I was scared.
Did
And
anyone witness it?
yeah, a couple people did, but
Oh, good, good, good.
nobody would say anything. And
Was it on camera?
it wasn't on camera, and it wasn't until later that day we had it was around like kind of, I guess it was like Thanksgiving a little bit.
Yeah.
So we were doing an associate breakfast that morning, and she went to the associate breakfast. So this is after her incident with me, and she tries to sit on another dude's lap. who's a supervisor at the hotel. And his name, he's a good guy. He actually he's given me a lot of guidance in my life. But he's sitting there trying to eat his egg McMuffin, and this woman comes up to him and starts whispering in his ear, and he's like, "What are you like? What's wrong with you? Like, what are you talking about?" And then she tries to sit on his lap, and he's married, so he gets up immediately and starts freaking out. And then he does that in front of everyone. Then she gets out, goes up into her floor, doesn't come down for the rest of the day. And at the end of the day, like people are like, "All right, we need to address this." And I told him like I needed to go home. Like I didn't even want to work. I felt really, really terrible on the inside.
Yeah.
And I it was so crazy because like how they didn't know how to handle it. I'm like, she messed up. Get rid of her. But nobody wanted to because like, oh, well, she does her job. She does her job. I'm like, but that's against the rules, right?
Right.
So I know what it's like to have those incidents occur. I mean, not as much probably as women do, but I mean, for me, that still sticks in my head a little bit. Every time I go into work, I think about that. And I've been working.
Wait, so she's still working there?
No, she got fired.
Oh, okay. Thank God.
She was getting so drunk she couldn't even clean the rooms anymore.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah.
I'll pray for her.
It's like, but that's like terrible instances. Like I see it from her perspective, like probably her life didn't turn out the way it should have and all this stuff. But it's crazy because even I walk into work and like to see like how I've moved on past that, but still kind of think about it. Like it's crazy to see that some people will take advantage of others.
It's disgusting.
And I mean, I at least I commend you for at least moving past that too and taking the high road with it as well. Like a lot of people wouldn't ever take the high road with something like that.
Yeah, and some old timers like tried to suggest that maybe it was my fault, or some people were saying like my boyfriend's like a pussy for not like going over there and like whooping his ass. But I agree that I think we handled it the way that it should have been handled because this is our job. Like this is how we bring home our paychecks, and especially because there was already tension there between them, I absolutely do not think that my boyfriend should have handled it outside of work or between them. I think it was handled how it should be handled. And I know one old timer came over to me and was like, he's like, "Are you sure that maybe you don't talk about certain things in front of him that maybe he,
you're alluring for it or something?"
Right. And that's just not true. Like, I do not talk to my bosses like that. I have a sense of humor. I joke about weird, twisted shit. I'm like one of the guys, like that's fine. But how come every other man in that building knows where the line is and knows what they can and cannot say to me? You know what I mean? It definitely, it wasn't me. And it like kind of offended me that he was suggesting that maybe I'm talking about topics with him that I shouldn't. Ugh.
Now, I do have to ask, with all this stuff that kind of happens, did you ever think about doing maybe your own welding on the side, like to start creating your own business maybe? Like, is this something you want to stick with the rest of your life, is just continue working for this company? Or did you have any other alternate routes in your life, like instead of welding, going on into something else?
There is other things. If I was ever to leave welding, I would want to go back to school because I do have an associate's, but I want to go back, and it would be for drug and alcohol counseling. I think I'd be very, very good at that. And I don't know about anyone else, but me, I've been to outpatient, I've had counselors, and I think the best counselors are ones who have been through it, not just someone who has read about it in a book. So I always connected more with the counselors who actually have that experience. So if I ever left welding, that would be something that I would be interested in. And then also, like I said, I got a personal welder, and I'm going to start out doing little trinkets and cutesy little artsy stuff. And it's going to start out as a hobby. I'm going to try to market it and sell it. And if that takes off, that'd be great. But if not, I'm just going to do it for myself,
I had this lady on my podcast who's a friend of my mom, and she owns the Wounded Warriors like opiate addiction thing.
Oh, cool.
And it helps like all these kids and all these mothers, like people that are like pregnant who are hooked on heroin and stuff. And she helps a lot of them recover. And I had this dream at one point, and what I wanted to do when I first originally started was I went to school for chemical dependency. I wanted to help out people with drugs.
Yeah.
Not giving them drugs, but helping them get off of them.
Right.
But when it comes to like how I wanted to end up doing social work and then a little bit more on psychology and then kind of diving off into different things. Still want to go back and get my bachelor's, but I found that I had this idea. I kind of want to run it by you and see if you think it would be a good idea.
Okay.
So I thought about opening up a wellness center, like a little bit of a retreat, kind of like an apartment complex. And
Oh, cool. Yeah.
it would have about 50 rooms. Each room would, so you'd have about 5 counselors. Each counselor would basically take 10 rooms under their wing. So that means in each of these rooms, it would be filled with 2 people. And there were people suffering from addiction, but people that were trying to get their life back on track, whether they were homeless or whatever. They would be given a certain allowance, but also have to go out and go get their own jobs and be able to live and kind of try and work and survive for a total of 6 months. And then we would check with them to see if they would have any change that would happen. Like, did they actually go and get a job? Did they actually make some money? Did they put any of their money aside for their own food? Did they buy anything? To see where it goes from there, while also giving them counseling, giving them meals such as a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, and have these types of meeting things too. I thought about getting a van and also being like, hey guys, we're doing bowling night. Who's like getting some types of group activities to kind of get them to associate and realize that they're not because I feel like a lot that goes on with addiction is the fact that you feel like nobody understands what you're going through.
Right. Yeah, I love that idea.
And I think what really would make you a very good counselor is, like you were saying, that you have to go through it yourself. You're very easy to talk to. You're very chill, and you come also with a very relatable and honest answer. So I feel like that's what a lot of people need. They don't need the thing like, oh, you're just hurt. Oh, you're just this. Stop telling them that they're hurt. They already know that. They don't want to be babied anymore. They need to, you need to talk to them like a normal person.
Right. Absolutely. I agree.
What would you say, like, if you were going to go back and go get this degree and go into school, like, would you want to become a counselor? Like, to really, like, what age groups would you help? Would you help maybe younger kids, or would you try and help people that have been going through it a while and seem like they can't shake it?
I never thought about that per se. I mean, I feel like I would be good with the younger kids just because I feel like I wish I had someone when I was that age, to like explain it to me and explain like how this is going to affect your life, and just I feel like it's almost better, like I'm lucky in a sense because it got nipped in the bud like when I was young, early 20s, and some people it doesn't happen until their life it's like too late, you know what I mean? So like I don't know if I would care about which age they are per se. The only thing I think would be hard about that job is that sadly the statistics show that most people don't get clean, and it can be like a never ending cycle. So I think that might be a difficult aspect of the job emotionally. But other than that, I wouldn't mind.
It's just like you were saying, though, the fact that like heroin felt so good.
Yeah.
The problem is that feeling that you get from that drug is like once you have it and you know what that feels like, you never want to not know what that feels like.
Exactly. Yep. And then it just makes it even harder because your body becomes physically dependent on it. And when you're dope sick, it's like it's undescribable. Like words can't even do justice to what a horrible feeling that is, that you become desperate.
Now, if I do have to ask, so like what was it like being on like heroin from someone that has never tried it before? Like like how would you describe it to somebody?
I've always said, and as fucked up as this sounds, it almost feels like God is like running through your veins. Like it's just warm throughout, and all your troubles and all your problems no longer matter, and you're just basically numb.
Now, how hard was it for you to kick like the addiction, like effects that were happening to you, like your body going through withdrawal? I know people get cold. I know it's like it feels so weird, like your body just totally loses like function.
Yeah. Well, I got clean a few times before prison, never for a significant amount of time, but each time I did it through rehab or whatever, and they put me on a drug called Suboxone. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
I am. Yeah.
Yep. And really, I feel like it's just another narcotic, and you're just switching one addiction for another, and you're just prolonging getting clean. And most people don't use it the right way, or they sell it, whatever. So it really got me clean off of heroin, was going to jail, and I had no other choice but to go through withdrawal. And honestly, that was the worst, like the lowest point in my life, because your eyes and nose are running, and you're sneezing, and you can't sleep even though you're so tired, and your knees ache, and just your whole body aches, like even like your hair hurts, just like everything hurts, just like the worst cold ever. But I mean, it's hard to do unless you're in jail because you have no other choice. But honestly, I think that is the best way to do it, just because you get on Suboxone or methadone, and it's going to be just as hard, if not harder, to quit those, because the withdrawals are nearly the same. So really, you're just prolonging it with those types of drugs.
Did you ever think at any point, like back in the day when you were suffering through all this, that your life was going to be where it's at now?
No, not at all.
Buying
Oh my
your own
God.
home, like
Yeah.
congratulations on
Thank
that,
you.
seriously. And then
Thank
finding
you.
some stable ground, and also working through, like, I know we all go through a daily kind of roller coaster of life problems and stuff, but congratulations to you. I mean, you overcame some shit, and you're still overcoming some shit, but still, it's like, did you ever think your life was going to be at this place now?
No, honestly, I couldn't imagine this. Like, it's so sad because I met a lot of good women in prison, and when you're in there, you're all sober for the most part, and you don't get to see that side of them where they're on drugs or whatever. And a ton, the majority of the women that I met in there are either dead, they're back on drugs, or they are just in and out of prison. And I remember, like, a week or so before my release, I was just so nervous, like, because I knew my mind was in a good place then, but I was just so nervous that my mindset would just switch. And am I gonna stay clean? Is my mindset is my mind gonna mess with me? Am I gonna go back on drugs? And I don't know. I consider myself very lucky and very blessed, because most women who get out, they don't really succeed or whatever per se. So I'm lucky and I'm blessed, and I almost have 9 years clean in December, and I have 3 beautiful dogs and a boyfriend who I am just so lucky to have. He's amazing, and we just bought a house, and just everything is right on line. It's on track. I'm so happy. I don't think I ever could have imagined life being this good.
To it. Well, hey, Sarah, I really appreciate you doing the podcast. I mean, it was amazing talking to you. I'm really glad that, like, we had the chance to. I know it was kind of weird. I kind of just randomly messaged you. You probably weren't expecting this at all. But I really appreciate you taking the time to, just have a conversation. Well, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode.